Thank you. And dear colleagues from Finland and from other Nordic countries. The title of my presentation is Early Childhood Education Pedagogy in the Nordic Countries, Similarities and Differences. I don't give any detailed information concerning the pedagogy and the similarities and or differences, but more kind of introduction and perhaps I try to also reflect what is going on in early childhood education in Nordic countries, and not so much only the discuss not so much only about pedagogy, but also the whole Nordic model. And I suppose that the other presenters, Eva Johansson, Anna-Maija Puroila, and Lasse Lipponen, and Marita Hännikainen, who has also prepared the presentation, they will give more details also. So, first we have to ask, do we have the Nordic ECEC model? And if we have, what are the key features of it? In the Nordic model, we have, I think that the early childhood education policies and the pedagogical practices, they are very closely connected. And we can't focus or investigate on the early childhood education pedagogy without looking at the policy model and the socio-cultural, historical model that is behind it. In the Nordic countries, early childhood education and care policies have built in the context of welfare state, as you all know. But as such, they are connected closely to other welfare policies, policy areas such as social policy, family policy, education policy, and labor policy. And I think that this is very significant. And if we think about the current situation of the Nordic policy, we have to very carefully think how the model has been created, and if we want to develop the model further, we have also take this broad approach into account. The aim of this Nordic model has been to produce democracy and social cohesion, and I think that this has been kind of success. And we have managed to do this very well. And the key features from the policy point of view has been that our services have been universal, they have been publicly organized, mainly publicly organized and integrated. And also we have had very much shared idea that well-trained staff is a significant element. If we want to provide high-quality early childhood education services, we need well-trained staff to make our ideals and our things into the practice. So in the Nordic model, young children are expected to be educated and cared in the public institutions in which qualified professionals organize stimulating activities and opportunities for children to develop their social competencies. And these social competencies, they were at the beginning of our Nordic model, much more emphasized. Not also today, but nowadays a bit different idea about children's learning and has been more taken into account. So we can see that nowadays, when the international organizations and many countries all over the world, they speak about investing in childhood and the future, we can say that in Nordic countries, the governments have already invested in childhood very long time, and this comes through in universal services. So today the concept of institutionalized childhood has become a part of the cultural belief system in the Nordic countries, where many parents take it for granted that public institutions are required for the appropriate education of young children. And the Nordic idea of universal institutionalized ECEC services has been well established in Nordic legislation. Now we can see that there are some trends in Nordic policies that are not so much following this earlier policy trends, but this differs from country to country, so they are a bit different. Nordic ECEC policies and pedagogy are often viewed as homogeneous. However, each Nordic country has its own political, geographic, and economic history that forms the basis for its national early childhood education policies. We had this week in Copenhagen a research network meeting, NECA, and there we also discussed about the Nordic model. There are some colleagues also who participated the meeting, and we discussed about the key elements of the Nordic model and what is going on with the model and what are the main challenges. And it was easy to realize after our workshop discussions that even though we still have very many similarities and we share the main ideas, the main features of the Nordic model, there are a lot of differences and there are a lot of variation between the Nordic countries and also inside the countries. There are some regional differences also in each country. For example, there are differences how we understand not how we see the meaning of well-trained staff, but we have differences in quality requirements and so on. So there are. But we will continue our work and elaborate our findings a bit further in this NECA network. So, but what really are the key features of the Nordic early childhood education pedagogy or the early childhood education model? As mentioned earlier, earlier Nordic model is very often described as integrated. It means that education, teaching, and caring form an integrated unit, and the term early childhood education and care is therefore typically used when describing the Nordic model. This is not very clear what we really mean by educare model, and I think that this is something we have to discuss and think about more carefully. But anyhow, we have very deeply shared idea that the humanistic values are forming the basement of our model. We have the holistic or integrated approach. We have a broad curriculum frame. The pedagogy is child-centered orientation. Play is very much emphasized. Also, children's and parents' participation is somehow emphasized. And something we, on the basis of our Gothenburg discussion, it was very easy to see that something we really share, at least in the group, in the Nordic research and professionals group that met there, is that we are not interested in standardized testing. And this is something we will need to think about, because I will later speak about the standardization process. But Eva and Anna-Maja will tell more about the values and give more details on the basis of their study. Usually when Nordic early childhood education and care model is described, it is described as a big success. And we have to think how do we know the Nordic story? What are the sources that are usually used when analyzing and describing the Nordic model? Whether it concerns the policy or pedagogy. And it is rather typical that curricula and policy documents have been the key sources to analyze these issues. And somehow we have to say that they represent the ideals of early childhood education policy and policies and pedagogy. We don't exactly know what is happening in the everyday practices, but there are the ideals, they are the goals, and the things we would like to happen also in everyday practices. We have very many good textbooks. For example, Johanna Einarsdottir, who is somewhere here, has edited books, and Ingrid Bramling Samuelsson, and we can read and learn about the Nordic models and the Nordic pedagogy on the basis of these books. And we have also good analysis, Nordic comparative analysis of guidelines for quality and content in early childhood education, written by Ann-Kristin Wahlberg-Groth from Sweden. And so we can learn about the ideals by reading these texts. But then we have to ask what really happens at the local level, pedagogical practices. And we have to ask how these ideals written in the policy and curricular documents, how they are implemented at the local level and transformed into the everyday practices. We know that there are local traditions. For example, if we go to different part of Finland, it is easy to see that the values and the things people are emphasizing in different parts of Finland, they vary, and there are local traditions. We know that there are also different professional generations and people from different educational backgrounds, and they may implement differently the ideals we have expressed in our national level documents. We also know that there is a lot of variation at the municipal level. Maiju already mentioned the childcare project. It is a very big new Finnish research consortium funded by the Strategic Research Council, Academy of Finland, and run by Professor Maarit Alasuutari from the University of Jyväskylä. Maarit is somewhere here. And the childcare consortium is investigating parental choices, early childhood education and care and childcare policies at the municipal local level, and also the children's paths and trajectories, what is happening and what kind of variation there are also in the context in which parents are making their choices. And everything this is studied from the equality or inequality point of view. And we have in this project different municipalities from different areas of Finland, and we have already noticed that there are various rationalities to understand the function of early childhood education and to organize early childhood education services in different municipalities. And this is well known that also, but that our research tells that there are also different resources to provide services along with multiple ways to understand the economical issues. And so it is very clear that what happens at the municipal level, at the local level, it produces kind of context also to the professionals to implement the ideals we have in our national level policy and curricular documents. And that's why it is so important that the more research is required.
Kirsti, can I interrupt you? Because now on the board there's just a question about, I think, the issues that you were now talking about. So someone is asking that, have you looked into the similarities and in the differences in the Nordic countries when it comes to the integration of services seen at the local level? So maybe this project that you just told us about is looking for these answers.
Not exactly, but I think that perhaps in Finland we have very big change coming, because we will have, I think that it is not proper time to go to this SOTE, but it will take some time. But if it is not possible for me to look at them at the same time when I give the presentation, so I'm sorry, but I have to be honest in this case. So anyhow, this is the local level is significant, and it is the level we have to think more and to focus more on. Nowadays, the Nordic model is in the global world, and we will meet new challenges. In Gothenburg, I was watching TV and saw Canada's Prime Minister Trudeau's interview from the TV, and he said that world is today more interconnected than never before. And in Canada, they had very interesting policy issues that related to immigrants and so on. So also we have met the increasing migration in Nordic countries. I think that Sweden especially, but also in other countries. And it will challenge the local policies and pedagogical practices, and that's why, for example, the research concerning values is so significant, because we have to reflect our values and our practices, what kind of expectations we have on, that forms or construct our practices, and what happens when people with a different value come to our practices. We have also seen the economic depression. Nordic countries differently, and some of them not so bad. But anyhow, when we discussed with our Nordic colleagues, it is easy to see that even though, for example, in some other country, the economic depression is not so big than it is in Finland, there are also cutting the expenses, and so it is not, we don't have money to waste in Nordic countries. And this challenges the idea of universal services. I don't mean that we have to give up, but we have to think about what this means. And for example, in Sweden, I heard that there are a lot of discussion, because there are so many children, new children that came to Sweden, how to organize services for all of them. And then we have the global standardization process, and it really challenges local cultures and local policies. Yes, so I go further. So we have these kind of transnational discourses, and one aim of them has been to standardize ECEC services nationwide, and it is somehow, we can see that it is a good thing, because if we want to standardize something, it means that that each child can get the same standard and can get the same things, and we can emphasize children's right to receive quality early childhood education services wherever she or he lives. But at the same time, it is something that is, we have to think what is the relation between the international, transnational discourses and standardization, and what is going on in the national and local level, and how is the relationship between these, so that, it is not from up to bottom, but also from bottom to up and so on. The more reciprocal development. And in the transnational discourses, it is easy to see that the trend is towards lifelong learning, measuring the learning outcomes. Now we have heard about OECD's idea to construct a new baby PISA project, and to start a PISA survey also with preschool teachers, and this is something that is very much against the key features of Nordic early childhood education model. We are not interested. We have not been interested in measuring the kind of learning outcomes, and I know that we are in many Nordic countries. There are a lot of processes going on with the evaluation. Starting the evaluation of ECEC services. So we have to think very carefully what are we evaluating, and how will this evaluation be? There are also the trend to schoolification and individualization, and also a new trend is that increasing trend in all Nordic countries, the marketization and privatization. It is very well known. And so there are some trends in these transnational discourses that are very different than if we compare them to our Nordic model and the key features of it. So we have to take very carefully and what to do and how to think about these issues. In Gothenburg, when we discussed about the Nordic model and the future of it, we shared the idea that the Nordic model has to be somehow revised. Because the world is changing, we cannot live as we have lived. But the increasing immigration, for example, it demands us to change something, but at the same time keep something that are very significant for us. And I think that the values issue is important for us to understand when we are developing these things. And as Tarja mentioned when she started our meeting, we have the increase in migration, and we have faced it, and this increasing migration requires new modes of participation. Because participation and the kind of things has been very significant. We have now new kind of parents, not only from different countries, but also we have different values inside. We have already had different values inside the Nordic countries. So we have very many kind of parents, and we have different cultural constructions concerning the participation. And if we want to develop the participation and also to keep the social cohesion going on, we have to think about our practices and the ways we work with people. And also children's participation, I think that even though we don't have only one way to think about learning, children's participation is very much emphasized, and it is so important that we know the meaningful learning experiences of the children, and therefore we have to know what are also their cultural experiences and constructions, and we have to deepen our understanding of this issue also. And the increasing migration gives us the question, who are included or excluded in our practices, and we have to think this very carefully. So the conclusion is that our pedagogical and working practices need to be revised, because we are not in the same situation anymore, but we have to keep something that is fundamental for us, and so. But I think that